So today marks World Stroke Day, a day dedicated to raising awareness about this often overlooked health crisis. Despite being a leading cause of death and disability worldwide, stroke remains a silent killer, particularly among the younger generation. To delve deeper into this issue and to discuss ways to combat the silent threat, we are now joined by the CEO of the Stroke Survivors Foundation, George Scola. And George himself is also a stroke survivor. And George, before we go into the significance of today, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Tell us about what happened when you were 37 years old, and how did you pick up that actually what you were going through was a stroke?
Good morning to you and to all the viewers. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock. It was a Saturday morning. I was busy moving home and just carried out some furniture. Next minute I felt a bit dizzy, so I dropped down to my haunches, and then I couldn't lift my leg because I wanted to sit on my butt. So I couldn't lift my leg, and I thought, okay, I'll use my arm, and then my arm wasn't working. So I kind of just leant over and fell to the floor. And fortunately, a friend of mine that was helping me was able to realize what was happening. And they called an ambulance. And within half an hour, I was in the ambulance on my way to hospital. And the thing that concerned me the most, because at that stage, I couldn't speak either. And I thought I was speaking. I didn't know I had dysphagia. But I was lying in that ambulance thinking, okay, so I'm not hurt and I'm not bleeding. So why am I in this ambulance? And that's because I didn't know what a stroke was.
Yeah, and at which point then did you realize what was happening, and the diagnosis came back as indeed this was a stroke?
So my cognitive ability was affected, right? So I was in property finance. So I was sitting with an occupational therapist, and they asked me the question 1 + 1. And I stalled not to give an answer because I honestly I couldn't find the answer to 1 + 1. And I think it was only at that point that I realized the trouble I was in, because and that was probably 3 weeks into it. So because your cognitive ability is not there, you don't quite realize what's happening. Because, after a few days in hospital, I tried to tell the team looking after me that I had a business to run. I need to get back to work. And they said, George, you're not understanding. You're going to be here for like 2 months. And that's how it worked out.
Yeah.
The cognitive ability only really came back after about 4, 5, 6 months, that you start understanding the true picture of what's happened.
Yeah, and I think the other thing was also losing your speech. At what point did you also realize, unfortunately, there's an issue with your speech and the impact that has had? Because the ability to communicate is quite essential, even when you're facing an emergency.
Absolutely. So I think that was probably the first couple of days that I realized, you know what, I'm saying things and people aren't answering the way I want them to answer. And then I started paying attention to what I was saying. And your mind says, hang on, that didn't sound like what you wanted to say, because it was just garbled and garbage coming out of my mouth. So, yeah, it's not saying you look, obviously, had I known what a stroke is or was, I would have known, okay, I've had a stroke. But because I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. And after after having chats with the doctors and you're being told that unfortunately you won't be mobile, you won't be able to get onto your motorbike, psychologically, what was that impact? What did it mean for you?
Yeah, let's not kid. the recovery journey of a stroke survivor is not the easiest thing to do,
Yeah.
because and obviously there's no two strokes are the same. That's the first thing I've got to state. Some people are affected left side, right side, the front, the back. So that affects different parts of your body. So some people end up with dysphagia, or asphagia, but others will end up with a physical disability. So the hard thing about stroke is that you have the physical ability and then the hidden disability. And the hidden ones are hard to explain, because you can't explain to an able person that you're fatigued, or you've got brain fog. I mean, what do these words mean to an able person? Essentially, you're just being lazy, that's all. That's their retort. But those are actual facts. Brain fog and fatigue, that's reality. When you don't have the motivation to simply get up and do something. So all these things are affected by where and how big the stroke is and how quickly you get treatment. So if there's one message I can send out today is, the minute you've you're having a stroke, or the signs of stroke, and the acronym is Be Fast. I can send you an image of that Be Fast, so you can post it out there. And it's just knowing the signs of a stroke. Blurry vision, a slanted face, your arms, you can't move your arms, you can't speak. So if we get that out and people know that they're having a stroke, you've got to get to a hospital quickly, because the quicker they treat you, the less damage is done to your brain and the better chance of recovery you have.
Yeah, actually, I do have the acronym here, FAST, which stands for face, arms, speech, as well as time. So that's what that acronym stands for. But tell us then about the recovery journey, the rehabilitation process, how long that took for you. And as you did say that, unfortunately, people don't experience stroke the same way. So I would imagine that even when it comes to treatment as well as the rehabilitation process, it doesn't unfold the same way.
Right. So one thing I need to clarify, that when you are in hospital, you've got doctors, nurses, and therapists looking after you, right? So you're in good hands. But what happens when you're discharged? Now, this is where there's a huge gap, because a lot of patients and families are not advised upon discharge of what's coming home. Now, the moment you discharge, that's the weakest and most, that's the weakest point in your recovery. Okay, you're going home, and now you're used to a certain level of treatment that you receive in the hospital. You go home, and what do the family know about taking care of you? I'm a huge advocate for social workers, because they are trained in the ability to make that transition from hospital to home a lot smoother. They can educate or upskill the family. And why is that important? Because when a stroke survivor gets home, if the family are prepared for what's coming home, they can make that journey easier for the stroke survivor, and also easier and lessen the burden of a stroke survivor, of a stroke. Because yes, we had the stroke, but the burden falls on the family, because you could be the main breadwinner. What happens to the family then? So there's a lot of psychological dynamics that change, because now roles are reversed. Okay, in my case, I couldn't tie my shoelaces when I went home. So now I've got to wait for my wife to come and tie my shoelaces. Now, you can't really do that to a grown man, because he's known how to do that since he was 5 years old. So you got to, your ego, you need to lose your ego very quickly, because your ego will complicate your recovery. And the family need to adjust to that, because now the main cog in the family, okay, my example, is removed. So who steps up to the plate? And that puts the burden on the families. So support and care post-stroke is crucial because we offer peer support to the families and to the stroke survivor to ease that road in that recovery period. And it's crucial because, we've been there, done that. Within 6 months, I'd become disabled, I'd lost my business, and I got divorced. Now, those are 3 pretty big events in a person's life. And to deal with those all at the same time, you kind of need help.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things that are affected by a stroke. And, I don't think people realize that.
Yeah. I think also people underestimate the mental toll that care work actually has on the people who are taking care of somebody used to be able-bodied who all of a sudden now needs all of this assistance. But just quickly speak to us about some of the risks associated to stroke. The independent papers, for instance, they spoke to dietitian Akari Erasmus, who said that some statistics are indicating that in South Africa, every hour, 10 people are affected by a stroke. Or suffer a stroke, while the neurosurgery and psychiatry journal says around 10% to 20% of stroke occurs in people between the ages of 18 to 50 years old.
Yeah, so the narrative needs to change about stroke because people need to realize it's no longer an old person's sickness or disease. It's happening younger and younger. I've met 14-year-olds that have had a stroke. I've met people born with a stroke. So in the womb, they had a stroke. Okay, the public don't realize that about stroke. And it's so simple to understand that a stroke is just a brain injury. Okay, so the same way you can hit your toe on the corner of a table is the same way you can injure your brain. Okay, it's just an organ. It's a brain injury, simple. So understanding that means that if anyone, okay, stroke does not discriminate from race, gender, age, okay?
Yeah.
It can happen to anyone. How do you go to a 14-year-old and say your lifestyle choices were not correct? Come on, man, a 14-year-old. They're eating correctly, they're growing, so whatever they eat, they burn off. Now, it's not always about lifestyle choices because a certain percentage of strokes are hereditary.
Yeah.
Now, how are you going to know that you've got a weak vessel in your brain? Yes, there are tests, but they cost money. Okay, now, only 16% of South Africa have medical aid or medical insurance. What happens to the other 95% odd? They're not going to have those tests. My stroke, I had, I've got thick blood. I had no idea I had thick blood. And that's not always lifestyle related. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I could go on for a long time here.
I totally get that. I totally get that. But what's that shorting part that you'd like to share with our audience this morning?
Sure. So obviously prevention is critical, right? Because you don't want to end up with a stroke. So, follow a healthy lifestyle. Don't drink, don't smoke, exercise. Okay, those are the common lifestyle choices. But know the signs of a stroke so you can identify a stroke. Could be your family. It could be at the workplace. Get them into a hospital quickly and recover and improve their chances of a better and faster recovery. Because what's important is that people need to know there is life post-stroke, but it boils down to the individual. You've got to do it. You've got to do your own, put in the effort to recover, to do your rehab, and that will shorten your recovery. And then obviously having a positive mindset is key to all of this. And that's not only the stroke survivor, but the families as well.
Yeah, there is life after a stroke. Thank you so much, George, for sharing your story with us.